Welcome to the Finance Lecture. What kind of restaurant gives away 1 day of revenue every week, rejects passive capital, refuses the normal franchise roll-up model, and still becomes one of the most productive food machines in America? That is the question. Not whether the chicken is good, not whether people like the sauce, not whether the phrase, "my pleasure" has some magical effect on consumer psychology. Those things matter, but they are not the mechanism. The mechanism is stranger. Chick-fil-A is a restaurant chain that behaves less like a restaurant chain than like a vertically disciplined capital allocator. It controls who may operate the store, it controls the site, it controls the equipment, it controls the menu architecture, it controls the rhythm of service. Then it allows the public to see only the pleasant outer layer, the chicken sandwich, the waffle fries, the clean dining room, the smiling employee. That outer layer is not fake, it is simply incomplete. When I was a young analyst at Salomon Brothers, I learned a rule that has never left me. The visible transaction is rarely where the money is made. On the mortgage desk, the borrower thought the loan was the product. The real product was duration, convexity, prepayment behavior, servicing rights, and the institutional ability to move risk from one balance sheet to another. The customer saw a house, the trader saw a structure. Chick-fil-A works the same way. The customer sees lunch, the company sees a controlled asset. Let me state the thesis carefully. Chick-fil-A does not primarily make money because it sells chicken. It makes money because it has built an unusually tight system for converting local human effort into corporate cash flow while keeping the brand experience consistent enough to support premium traffic density. That sentence is less charming than the advertising, but it is much closer to the truth. Most restaurant analysis starts in the wrong place. It asks what the company sells. A better question is what the company owns. A still better question is what the company refuses to let anyone else own. In a typical franchise model, the operator brings substantial capital, owns or controls much of the local business risk, and often tries to become a multi-unit empire. That is the logic behind many large franchise systems. The franchisor wants scale. The franchisee wants leverage. The bank wants collateral. The real estate owner wants rent. Everyone is using the restaurant as a node in a capital stack. Chick-fil-A breaks that pattern. The operator is not invited to become a little private equity fund. The operator is invited to become a local operating instrument. The initial franchise fee is unusually low. But the low fee is not generosity in the ordinary sense. It is a selection device. It says that capital is not the scarce input. Obedient operating intensity is the scarce input. Stay with that distinction. If the scarce input were capital, Chick-fil-A would optimize for wealthy franchisees. It would seek people with liquid assets, credit access, an appetite for multi-unit expansion. It would look more like a conventional franchise, compounding machine. But Chick-fil-A's official language is pointed in another direction. It says the opportunity is not for passive financial investment. It requires full-time, hands-on operation. It requires commitment to the restaurant, the team, and the community. That sounds sentimental. It is not sentimental. It is a governance model. Michael Jensen and William Meckling's agency theory gives us the clean vocabulary. The classic problem of the firm is that owners and managers do not have identical incentives. The owner wants value maximization. The manager may want leisure, status, autonomy, less conflict, a bigger staff, or a quieter life. So firms build contracts, monitoring systems, and compensation designs to reduce agency costs. Chick-fil-A's operator model is an agency cost machine. It does not eliminate agency problems through ownership in the normal way. It does something more unusual. It gives the operator enough economic upside and local status to behave like an owner, but not enough alienable ownership to behave like an independent capitalist. That is the hidden hinge. The operator has dignity, responsibility, and a path to wealth. But the operator does not fully own the asset in the way a normal franchisee owns a transferable local business. The operator cannot simply turn the location into a financial instrument, sell it, roll it up, or manage it from a distance. The operator is tied to presence. So Chick-fil-A gets a strange hybrid. It gets the intensity of entrepreneurship without surrendering the architecture of corporate control. Now compare that with the Surface story. The Surface story says Chick-fil-A wins because it has great service. That is true, but incomplete. Great service is not the cause. Great service is the output of a structure that selects, disciplines, and rewards a particular kind of operator. The real asset is not politeness. The real asset is repeatable attentiveness under volume pressure. A normal restaurant can be friendly when it is empty. The economic question is whether it can be friendly when the drive-through line is wrapped around the building, the kitchen is under stress, the lunch rush has compressed demand into 90 minutes, and the customer still expects the transaction to feel personal. That is where Chick-fil-A becomes interesting. The company monetizes pressure without letting pressure become visible as disorder. This is the service paradox. The busier the store becomes, the more valuable the system is, but also the more fragile it becomes. At enough volume, friendliness usually collapses into throughput. Accuracy collapses into speed. Training collapses into survival. Chick-fil-A's system is designed to prevent that collapse. This is why I do not begin with chicken. Chicken is the object moving through the machine. The machine is made of incentives. There is a personal analogy here that may seem too far away, but it is not. My father was a structural engineer in Pittsburgh. He spent his career on bridges and highway projects. He used to say that an amateur looks at the deck of a bridge, but an engineer looks at the load path. Where does the weight go? Which member carries it? Where does stress concentrate? Where does failure begin? Chick-fil-A is a load path business. The customer's demand enters at the brand. The operational stress moves to the local restaurant. The local operator absorbs responsibility. The workers absorb the execution burden. The corporation retains the brand, the model, the real estate logic, the training system, the fee stream, and the right to choose who is allowed inside the system. So what does that actually mean? It means Chick-fil-A's money is made in layers. The first layer is restaurant sales. The second layer is franchise and operating fees. The third layer is real estate and equipment control. The fourth layer is menu simplicity. The fifth layer is customer trust. The sixth layer is labor culture. The seventh layer is scarcity. And the most important layer is the one most customers never see. Chick-fil-A has turned a restaurant into a rights-controlled operating protocol. The sandwich is the payload. The system is the product. The conventional model of a restaurant is almost embarrassingly simple. Buy food at one price. Add labor, rent, utilities, packaging, and overhead. Sell the finished meal at a higher price. Keep the margin. That model is not wrong. It is just too shallow for Chick-fil-A. In the textbook version, a quick service restaurant competes on 4 variables: price, speed, location, and product quality. The chain that manages those variables best gets traffic. More traffic spreads fixed costs over more transactions. Higher average sales per unit produce better economics. The brand compounds. More locations open. The flywheel turns. This is the version one could teach in an introductory strategy class. But it fails to explain the most interesting facts. It does not explain why a chain closed on Sundays can still produce such high unit economics. It does not explain why a company would keep the initial franchise fee low while taking unusually demanding economics later. It does not explain why it would usually prevent operators from building large multi-unit portfolios. It does not explain why local presence matters so much in a business that could, in theory, be standardized and remotely managed. The answer is that Chick-fil-A is not optimizing for the same thing most franchise systems optimize for. A normal franchise system wants rapid unit growth with acceptable brand compliance. Chick-fil-A wants controlled unit productivity with unusually high operational fidelity. That difference sounds small. It is enormous. Consider the ordinary multi-unit franchisee. From the standpoint of a franchisor, that operator can be attractive. A large franchisee has capital, systems, bank relationships, hiring infrastructure, and market knowledge. The franchisor can sign fewer development agreements and open more stores. Growth becomes administratively easier. But the multi-unit franchisee also becomes powerful. Once a franchisee controls dozens or hundreds of stores, the bargaining relationship changes. The franchisee can resist menu changes, challenge remodel requirements, negotiate harder, and become a political bloc inside the system. This is the Applebee's problem, the Burger King problem, the Subway problem, the generalized franchisee power problem. Scale creates efficiency, but it also creates countervailing power. Chick-fil-A largely chooses a different bargain. It gives up some capital-light expansion speed to preserve system-level control. This is where Ronald Coase becomes useful. In The Nature of the Firm, Coase asks why firms exist at all. If markets are efficient, why not contract for everything externally? His answer is transaction costs. Firms internalize activities when the cost of using the market becomes too high. Chick-fil-A's genius is that it does not choose simply between hierarchy and market. It creates a third thing. It uses a franchise wrapper, but it suppresses many of the behaviors that make franchisees behave like independent market actors. The operator is local, but not fully autonomous. Entrepreneurial, but not freely scalable. Economically motivated, but not asset-owning in the conventional sense. Public-facing, but institutionally constrained. This is not a defect, it is the model. Let me make it concrete. Imagine 2 restaurants with the same menu, the same location, the same staff count, and the same demand. In restaurant 1, the manager is a salaried employee. In restaurant 2, the manager is an operator whose economic life, identity, and community status are tied to that restaurant. The second person will usually care more, not because he or she is morally superior, because the incentive field is different. Now imagine that the second person cannot sell the store, cannot become an absentee owner, cannot drift into portfolio management, and cannot treat the restaurant as one unit among many. The operator's upside depends on local execution. The operator's reputation depends on local execution. The operator's daily life depends on local execution. That is not just management, that is behavioral enclosure. In finance, we would call this a residual claim design. The person making operational decisions must feel enough of the residual economics to care deeply about marginal improvements. But Chick-fil-A also prevents that residual claim from becoming fully alienable property. This is the unusual part. A full owner can monetize the asset by selling it. A Chick-fil-A operator monetizes the position by operating it. That one distinction explains much of the system. There is an analogy from banking. A loan officer who originates loans and keeps no exposure to performance behaves differently from a banker whose institution holds the credit risk. The originate-to-distribute model can produce volume, but it can also produce quality drift. We saw versions of that before the financial crisis. Incentives that reward origination without long-term accountability produce predictable deterioration. Chick-fil-A does not want the restaurant equivalent of originate to distribute. It does not want someone opening stores and then abstracting away from the operating reality. It wants the person at the center of the unit to remain exposed to the messy details. The counterargument is real. This model is restrictive. It can look paternalistic. It limits the wealth-building potential of operators who might otherwise build multi-unit enterprises. It centralizes power at the corporate level. It creates dependency. It is not the heroic small business ownership story in its cleanest form, but that is precisely why it works for the company. There is a hard truth in business architecture. Systems that produce extreme consistency often do so by narrowing freedom somewhere else. Chick-fil-A narrows operator freedom. In exchange, it produces an experience that customers read as care. The experience is not merely trained, it is institutionally forced. Another example, think about the menu. In a normal restaurant, menu expansion feels like growth. More items mean more occasions, more customer segments, more average ticket opportunities. That is the temptation. Breakfast items, limited time offers, plant-based tests, spicy versions, family meals, drinks, desserts. Each new item looks individually rational, but the kitchen pays the complexity tax. Every item increases training burden, every ingredient increases inventory complexity, every preparation step increases error probability. Every menu expansion creates a hidden operational liability. The customer sees choice, the operator sees variance. Chick-fil-A has generally operated with a tighter menu logic than many competitors. Chicken is the core. The brand does not ask the kitchen to become everything to everyone. This compression matters because the chain's real business is throughput under trust. A smaller menu is not simply a marketing choice. It is a queue management technology. If the menu is narrow, training improves. If training improves, accuracy improves. If accuracy improves, trust improves. If trust improves, customers tolerate volume. If customers tolerate volume, the store can run hotter without losing the brand. That is the compounding loop. Heskett, Sasser, and Schlesinger's service profit chain is relevant here. Their work links internal service quality, employee satisfaction, customer value, customer loyalty, and profitability. The crude reading is that happy employees make happy customers. The sharper reading is that service firms are economic systems in which employee behavior becomes part of the product. At Chick-fil-A, the workers' tone, speed, and attentiveness are not decoration. They are part of the inventory. That is why the company cannot use a loose operating model. If the employee is part of the product, the operator must become a culture carrier. If the operator is a culture carrier, operator selection becomes capital allocation. If operator selection is capital allocation, the franchise process is not a personnel function. It is the core investment process of the firm. Right? That is the turn. Chick-fil-A makes money because it treats operating culture as an investable asset. Most companies say that. Chick-fil-A contracts around it. The history of Chick-fil-A is usually told as a founder story. Truett Cathy opens the Dwarf Grill in Hapeville, Georgia in 1946. He develops a chicken sandwich. The first Chick-fil-A restaurant opens in Atlanta in 1967. The chain grows from mall food courts to freestanding restaurants. It closes on Sundays. It builds a culture around hospitality. That story is true. It is also too clean. The deeper history is a history of format arbitrage. Chick-fil-A's early genius was not merely inventing a sandwich. It was understanding where the sandwich could travel before the rest of the restaurant system was ready to travel. The mall food court mattered because it reduced some of the hardest problems in restaurant expansion. Customer traffic was already aggregated. Parking was externalized. Destination demand was created by the mall. The restaurant did not have to invent the whole commercial ecosystem around itself. In other words, the mall was an operating subsidy. That is the kind of detail that disappears in popular business history. We like founder mythology because it gives us a person, but business models often emerge from infrastructures: highways, malls, suburbs, food courts, refrigeration, franchising law, payment systems, labor markets, school calendars, church rhythms, and zoning codes all shape what a restaurant can become. Chick-fil-A grew inside the American suburban machine. The timing matters. Post-war America did not merely build homes, it built patterns of movement. Families lived in one place, shopped in another, worked in another, and ate between those nodes. The enclosed mall became a climate-controlled consumption machine. The automobile made convenience valuable. The dual-income household made prepared food more frequent. The Sun Belt made the brand's early geography culturally coherent. Chick-fil-A was not selling into a timeless market. It was selling into a new American traffic pattern. This is where history becomes economics. A restaurant chain is always a bet on movement. Where do people already go? When are they hungry? How much time do they have? What uncertainty are they trying to reduce? The answer changes by era. The diner served one rhythm, the mall counter served another, the drive-thru serves another, the app serves another. Chick-fil-A survived the transition from mall logic to drive-thru logic because it was never only a mall company. It had a portable operating religion. I use that word carefully, not as a theological claim, as an institutional claim. The closed Sunday policy is often analyzed as brand identity or founder conviction. It is both. But economically, it also does something stranger. It converts a revenue sacrifice into a credibility signal. Most companies say values matter until values cost money. Chick-fil-A has a value that visibly costs money every week. Customers may like it or dislike it, but they cannot easily dismiss it as pure advertising. That gives the brand a rare form of believability. In signaling theory, Michael Spence taught us that a signal is powerful when it is costly enough that low-commitment imitators will not copy it. A college degree can signal ability partly because it is costly to obtain. A warranty can signal quality because a low-quality producer expects higher warranty costs. A closed Sunday policy signals institutional consistency because the company visibly forgoes sales. Now, I want to revise that point immediately. It would be lazy to say closing on Sunday simply makes the company more profitable. That is too neat. A seventh day of sales would obviously produce additional revenue in many locations. The policy has an opportunity cost. But strategy is not arithmetic alone. The question is not whether Sunday revenue exists. The question is whether the 6-day system produces enough trust, labor appeal, brand distinctiveness, and operational focus to offset part of the lost sales. The evidence suggests the system has worked, but the causal chain is not simple. The policy may help recruit certain operators. It may improve worker scheduling predictability. It may strengthen cultural coherence. It may create scarcity. It may give the brand a distinctive place in public memory. It may also repel some consumers or create site-specific problems in venues where Sunday traffic is important. So the honest answer is not that Sunday closure is magic. The honest answer is that Chick-fil-A turned a constraint into institutional identity, then built a business model disciplined enough to absorb the constraint. This is the lesson most competitors miss. They see the smile, they copy the script, they do not copy the constraint. A digression here is useful. In 1998, when I was at the Federal Reserve Board, I watched the long-term capital management episode from 3 floors away from the room where the decision-makers were operating. Long-term capital management did not fail because its models were stupid. The people were brilliant. It failed because the structure became fragile under stress. Leverage, liquidity, crowded trades, and institutional confidence all interacted. The point is not that Chick-fil-A resembles a hedge fund. It does not. The point is that structure beats surface intelligence. A brilliant trade inside the wrong balance sheet can die. An ordinary sandwich inside the right operating structure can become a national profit engine. That is the historical lesson. Chick-fil-A's sandwich is ordinary in one sense and extraordinary in another. It is ordinary because competitors can approximate fried chicken, pickles, buns, sauces, and fries. It is extraordinary because the sandwich is embedded in a structure that is hard to copy. The taste is only one component. The weight, the greeting, the accuracy, the cleanliness, the location, the social familiarity, the app, the drive-through choreography, the operator presence, the community rituals, and the brand expectation all attach themselves to the product. This is what economists call complementarity. Paul Milgram and John Roberts emphasize that business practices often work as systems. One practice raises the return to another. Menu simplicity raises the return to training. Training raises the return to drive-through volume. Operator selection raises the return to service culture. Service culture raises the return to brand trust. Brand trust raises the return to real estate investment. Real estate control raises the return to corporate governance. Pull out one piece and the rest weakens. That is why competitors cannot simply say, "My pleasure," and become Chick-fil-A. They are copying a phrase. They are not copying the complementarity set. The history nobody tells is not that a chicken sandwich conquered America. It is that a private company built a tightly coupled operating system across decades, then let the public confuse that system with friendliness. The friendliness is real, but it is also the final expression of a deeper architecture. Now we can talk about the money. At the store level, the first engine is average unit volume. A restaurant with higher sales per location can do things a weaker restaurant cannot do. It can support more labor. It can justify better sites. It can absorb waste. It can invest in training. It can handle technology. It can remodel. It can endure mistakes. It can spend more effort on hospitality without destroying the economics. This is where Chick-fil-A becomes structurally different from the average quick-service restaurant. High unit volume is not simply more revenue. It is more strategic room. Imagine a restaurant doing $2 million in annual sales. Now imagine another doing $9 million. The second restaurant is not merely 4.5 times bigger. It lives in a different operating universe. The manager has more labor scheduling flexibility. The fixed costs are diluted. The brand has more bargaining relevance. The site is more productive. The kitchen can specialize. The drive-thru can justify more choreography. Scale inside a single box is a different kind of scale from store count. This is the first surface mechanism. Chick-fil-A makes each unit work unusually hard. A weak operator opens more locations to grow. Chick-fil-A grows by making the unit dense. That density comes from traffic, but traffic comes from trust. Customers choose Chick-fil-A because they believe the transaction will be predictable. The line may be long, but the system will move. The employee will be polite. The order will probably be right. The food will taste the way it tasted last time. The bathroom will probably not be disgusting. The store will not feel chaotic even when it is crowded. That trust reduces the mental cost of buying. Do not underestimate that. In quick service food, the customer is not only buying calories, the customer is buying low decision risk convenience. A parent with children in the car does not want a culinary adventure. A worker with 30 minutes does not want uncertainty. A traveler does not want to gamble. A customer in a drive-thru line wants the future to be known. Chick-fil-A sells known outcomes. That is why the company can support enormous drive-thru demand. The line itself becomes a signal. In many categories, a line is a deterrent. At Chick-fil-A, the line can become proof of quality because customers believe the system knows how to process the crowd. This is not automatic. It is designed. The second surface mechanism is menu compression. A tight menu reduces entropy. Entropy is the enemy of fast food. Every additional item creates new failure paths. More ingredients, more prep routines, more inventory risk, more employee confusion, more kitchen congestion, more packaging complexity, more substitutions, more training decay. Chick-fil-A's menu is not tiny in an absolute sense, but the brand's center of gravity is unusually clear. Chicken sandwich, nuggets, fries, sauces, drinks, breakfast, catering extensions. The system does not ask the customer to decode a sprawling universe. It asks the customer to participate in a familiar ritual. That ritual speeds ordering. Speed supports volume. Volume supports labor. Labor supports service. Service supports trust. Trust supports the next visit. This is the operating flywheel. The third surface mechanism is labor intensity. Chick-fil-A often appears overstaffed compared with weaker competitors. Employees stand outside with tablets. Staff members redirect cars. People hand off meals before the window. The drive-thru becomes a distributed service line rather than a single bottleneck. A normal operator sees labor as a cost to minimize. Chick-fil-A often treats labor as throughput capital. This is a crucial distinction. Labor can be waste, or labor can be capacity. If one more worker outside can increase order throughput, reduce abandonment, improve accuracy, and prevent congestion, that worker is not merely an expense. That worker is part of the revenue engine. In manufacturing language, Chick-fil-A moves the constraint. A traditional drive-thru bottleneck sits at the speaker box, the payment window, or the pickup window. Chick-fil-A decomposes the bottleneck by pushing order-taking upstream, separating tasks, and using human contact to absorb complexity before the car reaches the handoff point. This is operations management, not charm. I once watched my daughter explain a machine learning infrastructure problem to me over dinner. I understood perhaps 60% of it. The part I did understand was that the system's performance depended less on the elegance of one model than on the pipeline around it. Data ingestion, latency, failure handling, routing, monitoring, deployment. The model could be excellent and the system could still fail. A restaurant is the same. The sandwich can be excellent and the throughput pipeline can still fail. Chick-fil-A wins because the pipeline is part of the brand. The fourth surface mechanism is site productivity. Because each restaurant can produce high sales volume, the company can justify sites and designs that would not work for a weaker operator. But there is tension here. High traffic creates community friction. Drive-through lines can block roads, anger neighbors, and trigger municipal resistance. The very demand that creates the economics also creates political and physical constraints. So the company must innovate around congestion. This is why new restaurant designs matter. Elevated drive-through concepts, mobile pickup zones, improved app ordering, and lane choreography are not cosmetic. They are attempts to raise the capacity ceiling of the box. Chick-fil-A is trying to keep demand from becoming a local externality. The fifth surface mechanism is the fee structure. This is where the restaurant economics flow upward. In the simplest version, the operator generates store-level revenue. Out of that revenue come food, labor, local operating costs, rent, fees, and other obligations. Chick-fil-A collects economics not merely as a supplier of brand name, but as the architect and controller of the operating system. The unusually low initial fee attracts attention, but the ongoing economics are where the machine becomes visible. A 15% base operating service fee on sales is not a casual royalty. A 50% share of net profits is not a light touch. Rent layered on top, even if capped as a share of sales, reinforces the company's position as capital provider and system owner. This is why the low entry fee should not be misunderstood. It lowers the capital gate at the front, but it does not make the relationship economically soft. It shifts the bargain from wealth screening to control screening. The operator does not buy into Chick-fil-A the way a conventional franchisee buys into many systems. The operator is admitted into Chick-fil-A. That difference is everything. The hidden wiring is that Chick-fil-A separates ownership from effort, then recombines them through control. That sounds abstract. It is not. In a normal capitalist story, the entrepreneur contributes capital, takes risk, owns the asset, and captures the upside. Chick-fil-A rearranges the sequence. The operator contributes effort, presence, discipline, leadership, local credibility, and day-to-day accountability. The corporation contributes brand, real estate logic, physical system, training architecture, supply chain standards, and capital-intensive development. Then the corporation retains the deeper property rights. Oliver Williamson would tell us to look for asset specificity. Where are the investments that have much less value outside the relationship? In Chick-fil-A's case, nearly everything important is specific. The restaurant is designed for Chick-fil-A. The equipment is configured for Chick-fil-A. The training is Chick-fil-A specific. The local operator's reputation becomes Chick-fil-A specific. The worker scripts, service routines, menu processes, and customer expectations are all embedded in the system. Once inside, the operator is valuable because of fit. That creates power for the corporation. The operator may be talented, but the operator's talent is monetized inside an architecture the operator does not own in the normal transferable sense. That is the brutal elegance of the model. It creates motivated local leadership while preventing local leadership from becoming independent capital. A private equity firm would understand this instantly. What makes a business valuable is not only cash flow, it is control over cash flow. Chick-fil-A's model gives corporate headquarters unusual control over the sources of cash flow because the company has not allowed the franchise system to fragment into powerful owner blocks. The operator is the face. Corporate holds the map. This is why the company can preserve consistency while remaining privately held. No public market pressure to maximize quarterly unit count. No activists demanding refranchising changes. No army of large franchisees forcing concessions. No need to please Wall Street with a simplified growth narrative. The family-controlled private structure gives the company patience. The operator structure gives it local intensity. The fee structure gives it corporate economics. 3 control systems overlap. Private ownership controls time. Operator selection controls behavior. Real estate and contract structure control cash flow. That is the actual machine. There is a second hidden mechanism. Chick-fil-A has made labor culture a demand generation asset. Most restaurants treat labor culture as internal. Chick-fil-A turns it outward. The customer experiences it directly. That means every worker becomes a small brand distribution node. This is powerful and fragile. It is powerful because courtesy creates emotional surplus. Customers forgive a line when the line feels managed. Customers forgive repetition when repetition feels reliable. Customers return not only because the food is good, but because the transaction does not insult them. It is fragile because culture is hard to scale. The more locations, the harder it becomes to keep the experience intact. Every new market is a test of whether the ritual can survive outside its original cultural habitat. Every new operator is a governance risk. Every new store adds revenue, but also adds variance. This is the hidden cost of expansion. A chain like McDonald's can tolerate a broader distribution of experiences because the brand promise is more transactional. Chick-fil-A's promise, is warmer, which means failures feel more visible. A rude employee at a generic fast food chain is expected. A rude employee at Chick-fil-A feels like a crack in the theology. That is the penalty of building a sacred brand. The third hidden mechanism is scarcity. Closing on Sunday is only the visible version. The deeper scarcity is access to the operator role, access to the brand, access to the local store, and access to consistency. Scarcity gives the system prestige. Prestige attracts ambitious operators. Ambitious operators raise execution quality. Execution quality raises customer trust. Customer trust raises revenue. Revenue validates the prestige. This is not merely marketing, it is institutional self-reinforcement. But let us not romanticize it. The model is not benevolent in a simple way. It is efficient because it is restrictive. It creates wealth, but it also decides who is allowed to participate in that wealth. It gives operators upside, but not full independence. It creates strong local businesses, but under corporate terms. It builds community presence, but also extracts a corporate claim on local operating excellence. That is not hypocrisy. That is the bargain. The mistake is to analyze Chick-fil-A as if it were making money in only one moral register. Good service, good chicken, good culture. That is the brochure. The institutional reality is sharper. Chick-fil-A has engineered a system in which care itself becomes monetizable because care is embedded in enforceable structure. A final comparison. In asset management, the best firms do not merely have good stock pickers. They have a process that prevents good stock pickers from destroying the firm. Risk limits, portfolio construction, drawdown rules, client communication, incentive design, compliance, capital allocation. The public sees performance. The institution sees process. Chick-fil-A is the restaurant version of that. The public sees the sandwich, the institution sees queue conversion, operator governance, menu entropy, labor throughput, site productivity, customer lifetime value, and contractual control. So how does Chick-fil-A actually make money? It sells chicken, yes, but more precisely, it sells a predictable experience with unusually high traffic density. It monetizes that density through a restrictive operator model. It captures corporate economics through fees, rent logic, brand control, and system design. It protects the experience through selective admission, menu discipline, private ownership, and local accountability. It turns service into throughput. It turns throughput into trust. It turns trust into volume. It turns volume into bargaining power. Then it keeps the property rights close enough to make sure the machine remains Chick-fil-A's machine. That is the answer. Not a chicken sandwich, a governance structure disguised as lunch.